pleasure to be here, ladies and gentlemen. It's lovely to be back in Johannesburg, seeing so many familiar faces and friends. It's just an absolute bloody joy. As you know me, for those of you who do, I'm a strategist in marketing and communications that got me into this ridiculous role of being a speaker. As you've heard, I've won awards. I facilitate, I MC, I speak. I try and do as much as I can because my wife wants me out of the house a lot. What I'm going to do with you this morning, and I have a very brief time to do so, they accorded the international speakers 10 minutes to do it. I'm going to try and do it in less, because I feel this is a bit like Tinder, isn't it? You're all kind of swiping left at the moment. I don't know which way you swipe. I've never been on Tinder. Never been on Grindr either, so don't worry about that. But you're all kind of swiping and thinking, what the hell is going on here? This is an awful session to be sitting through. I really empathize with you, because you've got all these speakers of different topics and talents coming up, and you've got to work out who you might want for your next event, or who you want to book as a client or as an event producer. There's a lot of talent out here. I talk around the world now about these 4 things: future fitness, getting your business ready, and I see a couple of speakers this morning have alluded to that already, in terms of what is changing. And because I'm based out of the UK now, although mainly on an aircraft somewhere, I'm in a situation where I like to study what's going on in a business sense. I love innovation, I love change, I always have and I always will. And one of the things with change is that the pace of it, as we all know, and you don't need to be reminded of that, is absolutely intense. So what is going on? What's happening in the outside world that we can learn from? What do we need to know about what's driving business agility, or shaping strategies, or changing in terms of collaborative natures of work? What do we need to be in terms of our work cultures? More flexible? Right, let's have a look at those very briefly in the time that I have accorded to me. Business has been around since virtually the Industrial Revolution. And when business started, where more people got together and they put people working in a similar organization, they needed a reference point, and that reference point, the only one they had, was by looking back in the rearview mirror, and the only place on the planet where people had been grouped together and took instruction and did stuff in the similar vein was the army. That's why we have the word company, by the way, for businesses. It's actually a military term. And the army runs on the same principle as traditional business, even though we're almost 200 and odd years on from that time now. And what we've always had is that structure that we understand it, we've lived with it, from the CEO all the way down to the boots on the ground. And yet what we're seeing now in emerging winning organizations, and the Fortune 500 is very, very different this year from what it was in years before, we're seeing a change or an adaptation from a more hierarchical situation into a much more organistic type feel, a holacracy, if you will, where people are doing different things. Their roles and what they do is changing at a continuous level. When you're looking at what they're doing in performance, for example, functions and roles in the classic world were defined. You knew what you were doing. You had a job description for it. It was very rigid in that particular aspect. And now what we're seeing is a monstrous change, where roles are a lot more external, they're a lot more fluid, and thinking like a living organism, we're getting a sense of belonging and identity being created in companies, the like of which has never been seen before. Instead of being focused on the individual, winning jobs and organizations today are focused on the collective. Moving out of those traditional silos back into into a more flexible ecosystem, where job roles kind of float like an organism inside a living cell, and things are different, and the way they happen is very, very different today. Sustainability is shaping strategy to a very large extent. When you look at what people are worried about in the outside world beyond South Africa right now, from my view, it's things like their carbon footprint reduction is becoming absolutely essential to companies, to audiences, to customers, everywhere across the board. We're looking at ethical supply chains are coming to the dominant fore right now, and people are looking at resource conservation in many, many different ways. Waste management, sustainability, all of these things are driving forward massively. And what I talk about in an extended keynote is how you can adapt to these types of things and start working with them a little bit better to have this more modernistic, successful approach. We all know about working from home. Well, remote teams are having problems right now bridging communication gaps, but technology is filling in. And I'll share with you, if we had a full keynote, what that means and what we need to do with it. We're analyzing data now. Data is the new oil, and it leads to increased productivity across the board. We're seeing technology shape more collaboration on virtual platforms, lowering operational expenses, and making sure that new things emerge that are a lot more collaborative to streamline management in its own regard. I mean, you talk about immediate change. We're here at VodaWorld right now. Last night, Samsung announced a simultaneous voice translator in 8 languages on your mobile device, on the Samsung device. So you literally talk into it, and whoever's listening at the other end gets the conversation in their own natural language in real time. It's remarkable what's happening. And you know, we've just heard about ChatGPT-4 and the ones that came before it. But let's remember that this is still very much a toddler. And you all know what a 1-year-old toddler is like. They're difficult, they're demanding, they break down, and they make an awful lot of noise. We do need to understand what we do with artificial intelligence, with the Internet of Things, with high-performance computing, which is going to be the dominant source of where we get an awful lot of business being driven forward between now and the end of this decade. We need to play with it, we need to understand it. It's got an immense amount of volume, it's going to be a lot more varied in terms of what people see. The speed at which it comes and the ability that we need to verify and literally make sure that we can validate that which artificial intelligence is giving us. We need to understand how relevant it needs to be in our own workplaces, how we adapt to it in terms of the incredible speed that it's coming from, the ethical choices as to what it does with you, and what we understand in terms of governance and thinking about how that will affect our new look, emerging style, holacratic businesses at that level. Flexibility is dominating work culture. We understand that, as I've mentioned, not just from working from home, but because of DEI being absolutely paramount across the world right now. In fact, in the UK and the television advertising industry, if you have a family shown on an advert, you have to have a spouse of color, a spouse of another color, or a significant other of another color, and a baby chosen from another race. You don't see families as they used to be anymore, anywhere at all. We need to understand what's happening in terms of work culture with our ethics and the way we think about those things. Our work-life balance is changing enormously with massive impact on every single one of us in this room. And we need to get into adaptive leadership in a very strong way. All of these things will lead us towards future fitness. People will have to partner with and marry up to technology. We're going to need in our new roles to bring a lot more creativity into every single approach that we have. But most of all, we're going to have to analyze and question everything very strongly inside our organizations. If you're going to lead for tomorrow, we need to do it today. You will see more change in this decade coming forward than any other human has ever seen since the dawn of change in human terms. It is coming at us hard. It is coming at us fast. What are you doing in terms of making and taking your own leadership choices and strategic decisions to empower the people across organizations? Because those choices and decisions are harder now than at any other time in human history. Unpacking your path to the future is absolutely paramount. And that's what I'd love to do with you at your next event. Thank you very much indeed. It's been a privilege being with you.